executive. It is a part of the federal government, so of course it's known affectionately as the FEE. Right? We all have to have an acronym.
No, government and FEE. That's not going to cut it.
So how many of you are chief sustainability officers or heads of sustainability in your organization? So my job is effectively your job. I'm working in what is like our CEO's office on sustainability across all of the federal agencies. The difference is that each of the federal agencies have their own management, their own mission, their own operating structure, and their own budget. So I actually work with a community of sustainability officers that are designated in all of the agencies to advance the president's agenda.
So your mission is the greening of government.
Absolutely.
Explain how it differs from what GSA does.
So GSA is one agency in the context of the government, and to kind of put that in context, GSA has an extraordinarily important mission, and what they do has a tremendous amount to do with how effective the other civilian agencies are going to be, in particular in meeting their sustainability goals. But if you think about the 500,000 or so buildings that the federal government owns, operates, or manages, GSA has something north of 30,000 of those, and with that, they're the largest single owner and manager of office space in America. The DoD, Department of Defense, has more than 300,000.
340,000, I think,
yes,
something like
exactly.
that. Yes,
343, they'll very proudly say. And so I'm working with DoD as well as GSA and all the other agencies to move forward sustainability in the context of whatever their mission happens to be.
So the GSA does not oversee those 343,000 buildings?
They may a few of them, but not most.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
And you came to this job from, speaking of buildings, the U.S. Green Building Council. What did you do there?
Was that of our 2 million, nearly 2 million civilian employees, more than 85% of the government doesn't actually work in Washington, D.C. Most of the federal government is out in communities around the country. It's out where a lot of us probably came from or grew up before we moved to Washington.
Mm-hmm. How do you engage the rank and file? Mm-hmm. Back in the day, and still, to a certain extent still the day, one of the pat pieces of advice in building a sustainable organization is get CEO buy-in. Right, that was everybody. And today, that's still is important. But there's now a lot of CEOs that say, "I'm in." Right. My problem is, how do I get everyone else involved? And in your case, you've got a CEO who's in, and that's a beautiful thing. But how this employee engagement piece work for you? I can imagine that must be a challenge.
It is. It is, and it's something that we really recognize from the get-go, because that ultimately, just like with everybody here who's working on achieving sustainability goals, setting the goals, doing the metrics, measuring against your targets is all important, but ultimately it's going to be how all those little decisions that we all make every day add up that's going to make or break our effort, right? And so one of the very first things that we did when the president signed the executive order is that he launched something called the GreenGov Challenge. And it was our initial foray into engaging the federal community, not just the folks who have energy and environment in their title, who really do have a very tight, a very well-developed community of practice in the federal government, but folks who had all sorts of other responsibilities. We had more than 16,000 folks chime in and share their ideas for what they felt the priority actions that every agency should take, like right out of the gate.
What's your plan for propagating good ideas?
Well, and this is an area where we think our office can really have a role and can help the community to continue to develop. There are a couple of tools out there already that are great and that we've really embraced. One is a tool called fedcenter.gov. And it's a wonderful website that's managed and maintained by a team across the agency community. And it has everything from the big announcements to the geeky details that really matter. So we've appreciated a great working partnership with them. And then building on the GreenGov Challenge, last year we held our first ever GreenGov Symposium in October, which brought together about 1,400 folks
here
in DC,
GW University.
At George Washington University. They were our wonderful partners in presenting that. And it was an important opportunity to create dialogue, not just among the federal agencies, but we really have a lot to learn from the private sector. Because I think probably as sustainability officers or as project managers on some of the stuff we're trying to get done, everybody kind of faces similar problems. the cool technology that you discovered to solve this, that, or the other, or a particular way that you organized around breaking down silos at a facility level are things that we can benefit from too. So we're trying to build on opportunities like the symposium to share. And then we also have another really important tool. I was going to say tool in our quiver. That is a total mixed metaphor. But clearly celebrating success.
It's an arrow in your tool chest, I think.
Exactly.
Is what it is, yeah.
Exactly. Celebrating success is something that's critically important for all of us to do together too. And so last year we hosted our first ever GreenGov Presidential Awards. And we had awards in 6 different categories. We were able to celebrate and really elevate some great work that was happening, not just at the agency level, but individual leaders like Anna Jones Crabtree out in Colorado, who is creating a sustainability team within her bioregion and was getting stuff done. Or a team in West Virginia from VA that was focused on greening their cafeteria and doing composting, who brought the farmer that they worked with them to the event. So celebrating those stories and continuing to connect dots across agencies from where we sit is one way that we're going to continue to bring people into the effort.
Is that something you want, don't want? Is that GSA? How do you relate to those kinds of opportunities?
We definitely want to hear about great ideas. We also want to hear about things that we need to do to make it easier for great ideas to come to fruition. And because sometimes, and similar to the way that our office can play a role in sort of connecting the dots on information, we can also play a role in helping to connect the dots on implementation. And certainly looking into this year, implementation is absolutely at the forefront of our agenda. We don't buy stuff. Our office doesn't, but we do connect with the community of professionals around the federal agencies who are going to have an interest in different kinds of topics, be it in the green IT world or the product world or distributed energy, clean energy, green products, bio-based products, any of the innumerable requirements of the executive order that are also grounded in what their portfolio is. Just thinking about bio-preferred for a moment. That's an opportunity. It's a new label that's out, and it's stewarded by USDA. USDA also has requirements for meeting green purchasing mandates under the executive order. So one of the things that we can do in working with private industry is certainly to understand what's at the front of leadership and to help connect those dots. But that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be talking to GSA or DOD or some of the other folks in the federal community as well. I think the best way for you all, this community, for the community of sustainability professionals, whether you have something to sell or not, to think about the community of sustainability professionals on the federal side is as colleagues. Colleagues who are interested in your strategic thinking, colleagues who are interested in understanding what's working, because we take very seriously our mandate from the president that we need to be leading by example and practicing what we preach.
What success looks like in terms of a green gov that in some date towards the end of your tenure here, let's say, end of 2016, pick a random time frame, what's the story you'd like to be able to tell?
Well, there are 2 answers to that question, I think. One is, we've got some very aggressive targets that the president has set for us and that agencies have set for themselves. And living up to our responsibility and meeting or exceeding all of those measured targets are absolutely critical. And that's number 1 on the agenda. I think the other number 1 is being able to have real stories that people can relate to talk about that. Because we're building a community within the federal government that's focused on this, so being able to share and celebrate with one another what's working, and being able to work successfully to resolve problems and challenges where they arise as part of that. How effective have we been? Are we going to be able to talk about those accomplishments in a way that people can really approach? And when we get to that idea of how are we leading by example, how are we practicing what we preach, how are we demonstrating that, not just here in DC, but among those communities where 85% of us work and live every day. What is the federal building like in your hometown? How are you interacting with your Social Security Administration office? What's the military base down the road like? How is it partnering with their community? Not just to think about sort of traditional issues, but also to think about renewable energy generation and how DOD's 25 by 25 goal relates to community-based energy planning. Having stories that talk about how our great ideas and great intentions in D.C. translate to my hometown of LaGrange, Georgia,
Right.
Or out in Texas or out in Southern California or in Kansas City or Oklahoma City or any of the other places where there's a big federal presence. Having folks at the local level feel what we mean by our commitment to be good neighbors and to practice what we preach matters an awful lot.